Hey guys, it's Graham. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking about the 4 best things about being a live-in au pair. Before I get too far into this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with all the new content that I produce. Thank you so much for your support and keep watching. This is going to be a good one. I do want to make a quick announcement before I jump into the video, and that is I have officially launched my Instagram page. It is at aupair.graham. Be sure to follow so you can keep up with all the day-to-day content that I publish there, not just the videos, but also what it's like to actually be in the life of an au pair. Okay, that being said, let's jump right into this video. So it is a beautiful day here in Seville. Lovely, lovely weather as always. And I am in a different location today. It is a Saturday. Literally everyone is at home. So this is probably the only place in the house where I might be able to go child-free for 20 minutes while I film this video. I say that to say, if you do hear noise in the background, if you do hear interruptions, I am outside right now and it's gonna be a part of the video. But getting that out of the way, I wanna jump into the intro, and essentially I'm making this video today on the back of another vlog that I did about a week ago talking about the downsides of being a live-in au pair. Now, I got a lot of response out of that video. I was really surprised. I wasn't expecting to get so much response, but a lot of people sent me DMs. I had some comments talking about the video, so I did want to follow it up, making this video talking about the great aspects of being a live-in au pair. I will link that video right up here so you can go and watch it after this one, or you can go and click on it and then come back to this one. But essentially in that video, I talked about the negative aspects of being a live-in au pair, and in this video, I want to talk about the positive aspects, which in my opinion, way overrule the negative aspects. Just like in anything else, there are downsides to being a live-in au pair, but as I'm about to tell you, the upsides are so great that I really think they way outweigh the downsides. Also, when you are weighing the option of being a live-in or a live-out au pair, the majority of host families don't offer live-out positions. Being live-out can be very expensive for the host family, and I think most host families have the space in their house and prefer to save the expense of paying for an apartment outside of their house. Now, if you do find a live-out position and that's what you want to do, take it by all means. But if you do have the chance to be live-in and you find yourself in a pretty good situation with the live-in accommodation, I highly suggest you take it. So here's 4 reasons why. The first reason that I've listed, and this is a really big one, is the cultural immersion. As a live-in au pair, you are going to be living with your host family, which means you're going to be living in their culture as well. When you're pushed into an environment like this, you are literally forced to integrate into that culture, or at least learn that culture to some extent, because if you don't, you're just not going to fit in. You're not going to be comfortable, and you're not going to easily mesh with the host family. So being inserted into this type of environment really forces you to get to know the culture and to be a bit more culturally diverse. And of course, a lot of the level of immersion depends on the host family you pick. If you go with a host family that is your same nationality or a similar culture as yours, you're probably not going to have a huge level of cultural immersion into your host country. But if you decide to live with a family that is very culturally accurate to your host country, then you're going to have the most genuine experience. If you're following the channel, you know that this is my 3rd au pair experience. I've had 2 before this, and I have gotten to see a very wide variety of cultures in my 3 different experiences. My first experience in Madrid was a very American experience. I didn't realize that it was American until I had a very Spanish experience later. Now, of course, they were a Spanish family, so we did do a lot of Spanish things, and I did get to see a lot of Spanish culture, but it wasn't absolute immersion like the second experience. My second experience, the au pair horror story experience, that family was extremely Spanish. They were about as Spanish comes. We ate Spanish food, we spoke Spanish at home. I mean, it was the genuine Spain au pair experience. And that was great in a sense because I really did get to see the day-to-day life of average Spaniards, but it was also really difficult because being immersed in a culture that completely with hardly any similarities to your home culture can be a real shock. And I think also it pushes you a bit more towards homesickness, but I'll talk about that later. My 3rd experience, the current one that I'm in right now, is very German. The host family is a German-Spanish family, and everything here is German. They speak German at home, they eat German foods, they work on a very German schedule. So it is very different than the first two experiences, but I am nonetheless immersed in this different culture. I think some big pros of cultural immersion are, one, it really broadens your horizons. When you're put into somebody else's culture, you can kind of see how people around the world live, and you get to see that your way of life is not the only way of life. Another big pro is you get to experience new things. This is one of my favorite things about being an au pair, and when you are culturally immersed, you experience new facets of culture that you've likely never seen before. You get to taste new foods, you get to see new things, and it really opens your eyes to a different way of living. I think the biggest con of cultural immersion is homesickness. When you are totally immersed in a culture, then I think you tend to get really homesick. And of course, this a lot will vary on the host family. If you're perhaps an American immersed in English culture, it's not going to be quite as bad as if you were an American immersed in, say, Russian culture, but I don't know any American au pairs in Russia. The second great thing about being a live-in au pair is the language immersion, or the linguistic immersion. I hear some au pairs complain about this point, saying that they don't get to speak their native language enough, but for me, this is one of the greatest aspects of being an au pair in general, is that you are immersed in a different language, and as a result, you learn a different language. I often tell people when we're talking about language learning that immersion is so effective because it's survival. When you are immersed in your host country's language, you have to learn it in order to survive, make friends, make connections, and if you don't, I think you're going to have a generally much less pleasant experience. Now, of course, this point doesn't apply if your host country speaks the same language as your home country, like America to Australia, but if you are going to a host country that speaks a different language, you will experience this linguistic immersion. And even if your host family speaks your native language like mine does, not everyone in your host country is going to speak your native language. So even if you're speaking English or your native language at home, when you go out to the street, when you meet friends, when you go to language school, you're going to be speaking your host country's language. And of course, just like the prior point, the level of linguistic immersion is going to depend in large part on the host family that you pick. If you pick a host family that speaks your native language very well, then you're probably not going to learn as much as if you went with a host family that does not speak much of your native language. Now, I do have to say communication is, I think, the most important thing as an au pair. So this means that even if you don't learn as much of your host country's language, I do suggest you go with a family that you can very easily communicate with, because this is going to prevent problems and help you have a smooth experience. And the great thing about going with a bilingual host family is you can always ask them to speak their native language to you. Having your host family speak your host country's language to you reinforces the information that you're learning in language school, and like this whole point's about, it really forces you to grasp onto their language and to pick it up quickly. As I said in the previous point, my current host family is a German-Spanish family, and they speak, I would say, mostly German at home. The kids speak German to one another, the mom speaks German to the kids, and as a result of me just listening to that, I've already learned quite a lot of German in the past month. So being immersed in the language, even though I'm not actively really studying it, has produced some impressive results just by passively being immersed and passively using the language. My biggest suggestion here is that you take advantage of the opportunity of complete linguistic immersion. Don't be that au pair that just hangs out with people from their home country, or who just hangs out with people that speaks their native language. I really suggest that you take advantage of the opportunity, because if you really do try to work hard, I promise you will learn a different language by the time you leave your host country. The third greatest thing about being a live-in au pair is that you get to build an incredible relationship with your host family. One of my favorite things about being an au pair is I can honestly say that I feel like I have a family in a different country. How crazy is that, to be 19 years old and say that you have all these connections in different parts of the world? The vast majority of people never get to make international connections like that, especially young people who can hold on to those connections for the rest of their lives. Now, I do have to say with this point, if you are talking with a host family that just wants an employee as an au pair and not really someone to be a part of their family, you're probably not going to make a huge connection with them. Or vice versa, if you just want to be like an employee, just clock in, clock out, nothing more, then you're probably not going to make a huge connection with your host family. But if you do try hard, if you do look for a host family that wants that personal connection, then I promise if you treat them well and if you really work hard, they're likely to do the same to you, and you likely will build a fantastic bond with them. Unfortunately, this isn't always the case. Not every host family is going to treat you well, as I learned in my second experience, but I think the majority of families are good. There are very, very few families that are really fantastic, and there are very, very few that are really crappy. So I think the good news is there's a lot of good families out there. You just have to find them. A big thing to think about is the level of intimacy of being a live-in au pair. Not only are you living in their house and having your most sacred place, your home, become their home, but you're also taking care of their most prized possession, their children. So you have this incredible level of access to their lives, and as a result, I think it's really easy to build bonds and to build a great relationship versus being live out, where you have less of an opportunity to make those relationships with your host family. As I mentioned earlier, I really feel like I can say I have a family in the US and a family here in Spain, and my host mom in Madrid, she and I still keep up. We still text back and forth every once in a while, send pictures. Having that level of support and knowing that someone really, really cares about me here in the country it's just a very enlightening experience, and it makes me very thankful for the connections I've made here. The last thing I have to say about this one, and this one is super special in my opinion, is as an au pair, you are going to be an integral part of a child's life, especially as a live-in au pair. You're going to live in their home, you're going to share your meals with them, you're going to share your time with them, and you will become a big part of their life. My host kids in Madrid, I can honestly say that I love them as if they were my family. I mean, they're so special to me, and I think that they would probably say the same about me. A great part of this is in the future going forward, I really do feel like they will be a part of my life and I will be a part of their life for a very, very long time, if not the rest of our lives. And having that knowledge, being able to say that you have that relationship with a child and you can impact a child in that way, it's just one of the most humbling things that a young person could do. The last big pro that I have about being a live-in au pair, and this one is quite literally priceless, it's very low cost. When you're a live-in au pair versus a live-out au pair, you don't have the expenses of groceries or transport or rent or utilities or anything like that. Pretty much everything you have comes furnished and somebody else pays for it. I also talked about the downsides of this point in my former video, and just to briefly sum it up, essentially it means that you don't have a lot of stuff to your own. A lot of things you have are shared, but nonetheless, I think the pros of this point definitely outweigh the cons. When you take away the expenses of paying rent, paying utilities, buying groceries, paying for transportation, being an au pair is really a very low cost option to travel the world, and I think that's why a lot of people are attracted to the idea in the first place. Another great thing about this is even though the family does buy the groceries and buy the food, every host family that I've had has definitely offered to buy me things if I wanted something special, and that's definitely something that you can ask, but I would specify that in the interviews just so you don't catch them off guard when they arrive or vice versa. I find this point to be especially practical for the more expensive cities in Europe like Paris or London. You don't have to worry about paying for the expenses of having your own place, and as a result you can spend your money doing things that are fun, that you enjoy doing. One thing that I suggest you do before you sign up with a host family is look at the accommodation they're offering. Most host families offer a room with a shared bathroom or a private bathroom. So go on Airbnb and type in your host city just some random nights and narrow down the search results to similar accommodations to what you have. A single room, maybe a small apartment, and then look up to see how much that costs. I have a good friend, Sarah, who's an au pair in Paris. Sarah, you're awesome if you're watching this. And she has this incredible living arrangement where she has this little cottage at the backyard of her family's house. It's separated. They do have a yard in between their house, but essentially she has a little apartment but also eats a lot with the family, so I do consider her a live-in au pair. Just to use Sarah as an example, I played around with the numbers a bit and I looked up apartments in a similar area of Paris of similar size. What I found was anywhere from 40 to 80 euros a night, which is quite expensive. So essentially Sarah is living somewhere that would be about 1,200 euros a month, and she's living there for free. So as you can imagine, it's a really great option for people who don't want to spend a ton of money traveling the world and don't want to have crappy living conditions. As a side note, I think most families, if they can afford an au pair, then they probably have a pretty nice house or will provide pretty good conditions for you. So that's a great aspect of being a live-in au pair. Another great example of this is I've been in Spain for almost a month now, and in the month that I've been here, I would bet that I've spent less than 50 euros on food. And I eat very well. I don't skimp. I get coffee pretty much every day, or maybe I'll get a snack or a sandwich outside of the house, and still 50 euros is practically nothing for a month of food. My host family pays for the rest of it, and I just pay for the extra stuff that I want. So being a live-in au pair does provide you the opportunity to spend your money in other ways that you want, like eating out or doing experiences, and not just sinking every penny you have into a tiny apartment. So in conclusion of this whole video, I know that there are some cons of being a live-in au pair, but I definitely think that the pros way outweigh the cons, and that being a live-in au pair is a very pleasant experience that all au pairs should try at least some point in their au pair stay. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you've enjoyed it, please be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment down below letting me know what you think. Be watching out for new videos as I post those every Monday and Thursday, and I hope to see you then. Muchas gracias por ver y adiós de Sevilla. Ciao!